Hello, welcome to Spirit Matters, spiritmatterstalk.com and Spirit Matters Talk on our YouTube channel. We are continuing a series of interviews without my venerated co-host, Dennis Ramundi, who's dealing with things and will be joining us probably the next time around. Today's guest, so we'll try to get the pronunciation right, is Machiel Klerk. Machiel is a social entrepreneur, a licensed mental health therapist, international speaker, author, and a dream worker, trained as a Jungian psychologist and in the spiritual and therapeutic value of dreams. He has studied the world, traveled the world, studying the healing and dream technologies of other cultures, especially in Africa, where he was born. He's the founder of the Jung Society of Utah and of Jung Platform, an online teaching organization. And he's here today to talk about his new book, Dream Guidance, Connecting to the Soul through Dream Incubation. Welcome, Machiel.
Thank you for having me, Philip. I've been looking forward to this.
Very good. Let's begin where we usually begin on Spirit Matters with a new guest. Please share with us in as brief a form as you can your own spiritual journey. How did you get started on your path? How did you end up becoming Jungian? Anything you'd like to tell us about your journey?
Yeah. Well, I think the door to the world of spirit opened up really not knowingly to me at that age. I was 10 and my father died relatively sudden due to an operation that didn't go well. And that caused such a massive heartache and heartbreak, and life became dark since that only changed in my early 20s when I, by some fortunate coincidence, stumbled upon the works of Carl Jung, who gave a way of seeing the world and a way of being and engaging with dreams that was really life enhancing, and started giving insights in and ponderings about life and death and the other side, and just a sense of purpose and coming into the world with a purpose, and having a shadow that I was living out, and having all kinds of unhelpful addictive behaviors and depressive behaviors as a way of managing that heartbreak. And connecting to the world of spirit helped me get to terms with it. And that was really how that world opened up to me through a massive heartbreak. And then in that heartbreak, I found a lifeline and a thread of life that I've been holding on ever since, and has been very helpful to me. And that's also partly why I wrote the book, is it did so much for me that I had the sense of, I want to offer a suggestion on how to connect to a sense of soul or a sense of purpose through dreams. So that's in a nutshell how that opened up.
Since you mentioned Jung and he was such a big influence on your life, before we get into the substance of your book, I'd like to ask you about Jung. And from my admittedly limited exposure to him, he was one of the few psychologists, certainly in his day, certainly in the psychoanalytic school, that took spirituality seriously, that saw something beyond the usual framework that psychoanalysis operated from. And he famously had a split with Freud Can you tell us a bit about Jung and his take on spirituality, which was way ahead of its time, as I recall? And was that the reason or a reason for that split with Freud?
Yeah, indeed. Jung saw a relationship to the world of spirit, or a spiritual relationship, as fundamental to one's life. And he thought that almost any problem, especially in the second half of life, could be almost brought back to a lack of a spiritual relationship, a lack of meaning, and how to refine a sense of meaning in that way. And I remember also he termed these things like the collective unconscious, and a realm that we all share and that we're connected to, just like waves on the ocean. We are the wave, the ocean is the collective unconscious that we all share, and that could also be seen as the realm of spirit. And he developed even this way of say curing or finding some form of a cure for addiction, where he said it's actually the search for spirit that people try to find in the bottle. But if they have a real spiritual life, that's the only real thing that can cure alcoholism for the long term, and became also the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so he had spirit was essential in his thinking.
And he was from a very traditional Protestant culture.
Yeah.
But he, especially, for the early part of the 20th century, he was really open to the spiritual traditions of the East and wrote a lot about them, which is how I came to appreciate him. Was that a big influence on him? Was he also influenced spiritually by his own Christian tradition?
Yeah, very, very much so. His dad was actually a minister. And so he was grown up in that tradition. And at that time, Swiss, where he lived at the late 1900s, when he was a child, was very homogeneously Protestant, so that the whole culture was influenced by it. And he really had his own crack, after which he took on this kind of spiritual journey in himself, which he wrote down in the Red Book, and he called that the confrontation with the unconscious, and that opened him up. And then all these other traditions started to validate his own experience. And he said, "Oh, look, in alchemy you have the same, or in the Tao you have it, and Hinduism, these people go through similar experiences," and that helped him tremendously. And he gave the West a Western way of thinking about itself, but also thinking about other cultures and seeing what we can learn from them.
Speaking of which, your focus, at least in this book, and probably in much of your work as a therapist, is in the use of dreams. To what extent are dreams considered useful methodologically, I guess you would say, or for whatever reason, in the spiritual paths of other cultures, other than in the world of depth psychology? You've studied a lot of this, and I'd love to hear your take on the use of dreams.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It varies a little bit from culture to culture. Almost any shamanic culture has a way of connecting to the dreams, and see the dreams as a way by which spirits or the divine or ancestors engage with humans, and can be of support and help or guidance or warning an individual. Very often, those cultures really see the dream as another world, a world that coexists next to this world, is interconnected, and we can relate to the beings that live in this other world. That's at the base of actually any shamanic tradition. Then what you see more in the Eastern tradition, or at least what I've seen more in the Eastern traditions, is that it's also used as a path to enlightenment, but then more in especially in Tibetan Buddhism, where the understanding of how the world of dream is created, and how that which mechanisms form there, and because the dream is a world we find ourselves in at night, and is actually created by mind, our own mind. And so how does mind portray this world? And there are all kinds of these mechanics, dynamics in it, like it's your belief system and your karma or complexes. And this world we live in right now is somewhat co-created in a similar way. And by understanding how the dream world is created, we learn about the nature of this reality, and we become more aware and more in tune with the true nature of reality. And in Buddhism, one of the paths is that can lead then to enlightenment.
Interesting. Your book, Dream Guidance, in the subtitle, you use the term dream incubation. Can you explain the use of that term, incubation, and what you mean by it?
Yeah, dream incubation is the old method of asking your dream a question before you go to sleep in order for you to have a helpful dream. And some people in some cultures would ask Allah for guidance, or the spirit guide, or the dream, or the divine, or Asclepius, or whatever name people have given throughout history to some mysterious force that seems to live in and beyond the dream. And almost any spiritual and religious tradition around the world has noticed that you can petition that mysterious force for help and guidance on your life path. And the process of doing that is called dream incubation.
Did Jung call it that?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh. You know, in the research on creativity that I had to follow, there's they use the term incubation in almost a similar way, not with respect to dreams, although often the creative impulse can come in a dream, but they use it for the time between the conscious engagement with a problem or a creative project, and then the getting away from it, and then the inspiration coming at some point during that time of incubation. Is that similar? It's sort of with the unconscious doing the work.
Yeah, it is very similar, and that method also works very well, and you can do it. You can compress it in that time frame of asking before you go to bed a question, or incubate it, and that pressure is very important to trigger this response in the dream. And it can be done for creative problems, health problems. The old Greek people did it even for physical problems. A whole set of questions we can incubate and find ways to trigger the unconscious to respond.
In the book, you have a 5-step process to help people have what you call an incubation dream.
Yeah.
You want to go through those 5 steps for us?
Yes. Step 1, and I can maybe do it by sharing an example.
Please.
Step 1 is really identifying that you have a question. And so we all have questions. We carry almost constantly some form of a question. But the first is really noticing, what shall I ask? And you want to preferably ask something that's really relevant to your life path. So if I ask, what did the neighbor have for dinner yesterday? The dream is like, not going to respond to that. But if we ask, how can I be a more loving person? Or how can I, what is one type of food that is healthy for me to eat? Or I love to bring my creative project further into the world, or I'm stuck with this character in my book, or anything that's really relevant to you. That's a great question to ask. And not so long ago, there was this man that came to me. He said, I've been divorced for a year and I would love to go, I'm dating again, but it doesn't really flow well. He said, can I ask, how can I find a new partner? Yeah, that's a great question. It's relevant. It's heart-based. You probably want to look a little bit at what is your intention in it, because finding the right intention is really helpful. And he took a little bit of time. And then, so step one was, that's the topic I want to ask a question. The second part is formulating the right question. And that's really important. So make it one question at a time. I saw this morning from someone who said, how can I be a good mother and a good business leader? Then you get a dream, and it's going to be really difficult to figure out which part of the dream is responding to mother and which one to the business leader, or do they both? And that's difficult. So if you just say, how can I be a better mother? Great. How can I be a better business leader? Great. So this person actually was pondering about it, and I thought, actually what I really want to know is, what is my biggest obstacle in dating? And that's a great question. It's one question at a time. It's open-ended. What is my biggest obstacle in dating? Then step 3 is write it down, because for some reason we'll forget sometimes the question, and the dream responds to the question. Write it down, and then in order to build that pressure, do some form of a ritual, because actually pressure creates our experience. If I have a lot of pressure around anxiety, I will have a lot of anxious thoughts. If I pressure my question, the likelihood of having the dream respond to it increases. Therefore, it's important to take something that's important to you, because the pressure is already there. And you can do that through a ritual. And with ritual, I really mean take some time to either dance it, sing it, make a drawing. This man made a drawing of a heart, put a question mark on it, wrote to the dream, and that was his ritual. Then step 4, go to bed, meditate maybe for 1 or 2 minutes on your question, sleep, and then step 5, write down the dream upon waking, because these dreams evaporate very easily, and then work on it. And this, so those are the 5 steps.
The ritual part, do you recommend they do that right before going to bed?
Well, I think actually the ritual is best to do it, stretch it out over the whole process. So even thinking about your question, light a candle, say, dream, I'm planning to engage with you. I would love to have your support for my health. It's so important for me. And then talk to it. If I'm more healthy, it's easier for me to deliver my gift to community, to help my neighbors, to be more happy. And then the whole journey becomes one big ritual in which you add elements as drawing, talking, praying, whatever it is. If you want to cook and make a meal and give something to the spirit, also good. Something that you think of.
2 questions related. One, it sounds on the surface that you do this before going to sleep, and assuming you remember your dream in the morning, you work with that. How you work with it, I want to come back to. Might it happen? Might something come in a dream 2 nights later, a week later? Might it come during the waking state?
Yeah, great question. I given that also a lot of thought. What I've noticed in my own life and with the people I work with is that people sometimes say, hey, I didn't have a dream, but I knew what to do upon waking. Or, hey, I didn't know, but then my nephew called and told me just the thing I needed to know. So it's almost like synchronicity starts conspiring to bring that answer towards you. So yeah, it can come. And I made it, if it's really important, I will ask several nights in a row. If I don't get a question, I stop after 3 nights, but that's completely arbitrary. And but it can come later as well. Yeah.
Then there's the obvious question. Anybody who's ever taken Psychology 101 or has had therapy knows that dreams require interpretation, that
Yes.
they're another reality, presumably symbolic. So we get into the knotty question of how does the person interpret the dream to derive benefit from it?
Yeah, fantastic question. And I thought about it a lot because there's so many ways that people engage with a dream, and multiple ways might be very right. So one way that I suggest for people to work with it is, instead of asking the question, what does this mean, which is usually the most classic question people ask, is what is happening? Because with the question, what is happening, you get a storyline. And the storyline usually answers something of your question, especially with these dream incubation questions. Like, what does it look like for me to go to move to Hawaii? If I see someone driving a car swirling around on the road and then falling off the cliff, I can say, oh, what's happening? Oh, someone falls off the cliff. There's an accident. It's not a great prediction. And the example of this man who asked this question about what's my biggest obstacle in my dating life had a dream. He said, I'm driving through a tunnel in my car. I first think I see a mountain lion, yet when I get closer, I see it's a tiger. It's beautiful, but I get really scared. I slam on the brakes and I back out. Now, if you would ask the question, what does it mean? You very quickly get to what's the tunnel, what's the car, what's the lion or the tiger? And then you look it up and you get this confusing Google responses. Yet if he asked what is happening, and then he wrote, I'm driving along, I'm moving through life. It's a little bit of an interpretation, but he says, then I see something that I find really beautiful. And when I see that really beautiful being, I get really scared in the dream and I slam on the brakes and I back out. And then it is the question, hey, where in your dating life do you see something that is beautiful, that scares you, and you back out? And you can find that pattern most likely.
Yeah, and I can see where a person might take the tunnel symbol, and if the question was what does it mean, you get stuck on the tunnel symbol.
Yeah, for example, yes.
That's very interesting. What happened with that man? What did he then do? How did he operationalize this insight?
Yeah. So, on one hand, it's the start of a journey in the dream incubation journey, and so now he knows. I get fear when I get fearful. I slam on the brakes. I back out, and so then you can go back in the dream and sense a little bit. What is it like seeing the tiger? And then you get a sense of, the tiger, it's really beautiful, but I feel my throat choke up, and I already notice my body moves back, and I start having this movement. And when he starts just sitting in that energy for a couple of minutes at a time, he will be able to notice when that is happening, because it happens more or less unconscious for him. He sees it, boom, he's gone. So he wants to really have a slower awareness, like, oh, I get really scared. Oh yeah, when I get scared, I want to back out. Okay, can I sustain this? That will give him more awareness and an opportunity to start making different decisions. And yeah, that will take him some work, but that's part of the work for him.
Now, presumably, that man in that example had you to help him in a therapeutic context or whatever. In a book, people presumably will read your instructions, try it out, and they don't have you to help them interpret the story in the dream or to decide on the next step.
Yeah.
So somebody hearing you now poses a question to before going to bed to the divine or to the unconscious, however it works out, or however it's interpreted, and then has a dream. How does that person feel confident in not necessarily interpreting it, but using the dream? And presumably one wants to come away with a lesson. And we all know that in our lives, we often learn the wrong lessons as opposed to, the lesson that we should hear instead of the one we want to hear. How do people deal with all those dynamics?
Yeah. So first thing I encourage people to make sure you write down the dream, because half the dreams are actually pretty straightforward with this method. People go like, oh, they ask, what does it look like to move to another city or take this job? And then either you see a car crash or you see flowers coming out of the ground. You get it. So that half is relatively easy. The other half is that that's just you think this is gibberish, and so make sure you write it down, because what it usually is, it is information from an angle that you hadn't thought of before, and usually you're stuck. So this is something new, and then just let it simmer. Come back in a couple of hours later. You read it again. Maybe your own intuition will also want to help you. If it's in service of you becoming more kind or loving or aware, there's something in us that supports that, and that tries to support also after the fact. Or read it to your partner or a friend, and they might mirror something back if you don't get it. And I think that asking the question, what is the experience or what is happening, will also often get you pretty far. And if you puzzled on it and you let it simmer for a day and you still don't get it, I sometimes tell the dream also, like, if it's a very important dream, I'm very flattered that you think so highly of me, but this just way too complex. Please dumb it down for me. And then sometimes the dream helps it, and sometimes I think the dream wants us to puzzle better or find an angle, or yeah.
Are some people better at this than others, or maybe better isn't the right word? Does the method, is it more useful for certain kinds of people and other people have difficulty with it? What are the sort of factors that play into this?
Well, at Harvard University, they tested this method on students. And what they noticed is that the students that they had a panel of people analyzing, looking at the dreams, seeing if it made sense. And what they noticed is that the people that asked a question that was either emotionally irrelevant or of medical nature would have a high response rate in getting an understandable answer. If questions were too conceptual or not personally relevant, either no dream or a dream that they couldn't really figure out. So it's maybe not even who the person is, but more the intent and the nature of the question. So if it's something is really, you've been working on it, you're stuck, it would be really good for you to know something in you on a certain moment is willing to give a clue.
And so is motivation part of people with a strong motivation, a strong need to know something or learn something? Are they more likely to get results than people who are indifferent? Or
Right. Yeah, indifference doesn't do well with this technique.
And intent.
Yep.
Seems
Intent
to matter. What is it? What about if somebody has selfish or greedy or narcissistic intentions and wants some help from the dream world? Does that is the response different from somebody who has a more noble aspiration?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the first time people really started asking me that was in South Africa. So I'd been doing this for several years, and then they were like, "Can you ask for evil purposes?"
Yeah.
And first I thought, why would you do that? But but what it appears like is that this phenomenon is very non-judgmental. So it does give opportunity to do things that, from a moral point of view, aren't very helpful, and it even can give some suggestions. Just like I assume that the criminal who's planning something will have an intuition on how to do this best, or the drug dealer feels like the police is coming. So somehow they have also an intuition that warns them, that helps them. And so it is possible. I think that this works that way. And I can only encourage, if you get just more paranoid and all kinds of other unhelpful side effects, because there are side effects to these paths.
So is it possible, or in your experience, have people look to dreams for selfish or cruel purposes and been warned not to in the dream? Been steered away from an intention or a plan?
Well, I haven't worked with a person actively to help them ask such a question, but I've seen that I've worked a long time with addicts, and I once in a while go to an addiction clinic to work with the people there, and then we'll ask the question is, what is one thing I can do to stay sober? And then they get all kinds of different answers to that, and the internal compassionate counselor knows it very well. But what I've seen with addicts, for example, is that very often in regular dreams they might encounter a person that says you shouldn't be doing this, or they go into a one-way street and the police comes and tries to get them back, or people are standing like this when they're driving their car. So it seems that something in us does give a signal, hey, this is direction you're moving into. Then I think there's free will, that we can choose that, but it looks like that we do get feedback on our, that's probably it. We get feedback on our activities and we need to decipher whether it's helpful or unhelpful.
And when a person gets an answer, a discernible answer, and it points to a change of behavior or a certain kind of reform in one's life, do people, does believing in this process matter a lot when it comes to putting it into practice?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I've seen people get really remarkable dreams, and they think, well, that's clear. That's a really kind of this mystery to tell you these things, and then they just don't really do it.
Mm.
And I can see how you don't put a value in it that I think it has.
Mm. Or it's not a direction they find easy to go.
Yeah. Yeah,
Machiel,
or just don't believe it, or some things. Yeah.
Thank you for being real about that. As I'm sure there's a great variation. We don't have that much time left, but coming back to Carl Jung, you founded something called the Jung Platform. Tell us about that. From what I saw, it's there's a lot of material on there for people who want to delve more deeply into Jungian thought and processes. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that was that came forth out of a spontaneous dream I had at night, that I took as I saw Carl Jung building a platform attached to his yard in the water, and then Jung and the platform disappeared while I was looking at it, and a voice behind me said, "Now you have to draw it, identical to how it was." And I think I can draw. I make a line more straight than I think I can draw, and then I woke up, and I thought, what if I take this somewhat symbolically, and I create a platform for Jung and Jungian psychology, but that builds further on Jung, or that it's not dogmatic. So it takes, like Jung, all kinds of tradition into account that honor a spiritual world. And so I started at first with a nonprofit in Utah. To my own surprise, hundreds of people showed up for these lectures. And then I took some of these lectures and new programs and created the Jung platform, where we provide introduction and intermediate programs on Jungian psychology, like the shadow, and we have a free summit coming up on the shadow, or archetypes, synchronicity, how to get into your myth, but also family karma, or some Buddhist thought, or African shamanism, for just accessible programs for the general public to take into their life something that I hope that gives them sense of meaning and purpose.
What's the website?
Jung Platform, JUNG platform.com.
You just mentioned karma. One quick question before we go. Did Jung write about karma? What did he think about that?
Yeah, he in his somewhat autobiography, he writes in his I think in the section later life or late thoughts, he thinks that karma exists. He leans towards being likely that we reincarnate, and that karma plays a role in that. And he sees that these archetypes might be some variation on karma as well. Interesting.
I'll have to look into that. Machiel Klerk, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. His new book, Dream Guidance, Connecting to the Soul Through Dream Incubation. Thanks so much for being with us. And listeners, if you're new to Spirit Matters, take a look at our archive. There's getting close to 300 interviews now with some fascinating people, some of whom are household words, many of whom deserve to be better known, but you'll find a lot of wisdom and guidance in there. And please hit the subscribe button. It's free. Everything is free, and we want to keep it that way. And so there's also a contribution button if you care to make a contribution, so we can keep improving the technology and keeping the platform free of charge for everybody. Again, thanks, Machiel. It's good to be with you. Any final words in a few seconds for our listeners?
I want to encourage them to play and experiment. Cannot do much wrong. Take one question tonight, do a little ritual, try it. If it doesn't, if you don't get the exact result, try again. Build your own relationship to your to the mystery, and this is just one tool that can help you, whether it's on a frequent basis or once in a while. And I want to thank you, Philip, for your interest and curiosity and energy you bring to this interview conversation. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I hope to see you in person sometime. Take care. Bye, everybody.